This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And welcome into the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast, where we talk about everything in the world of sports. My name is Anthony. Ben is out, and so is Jeremiah. Jeremiah will be back for the football podcast later on today. So, talk about sports. So, what's the first thing we're going to talk about with sports? Or we're going to talk about Grayson Allen. More specifically, his departure and his reemergence for the Duke Blue Devils. So, I don't know if you remember this, but, Grayson Allen has how can I phrase this? He likes to kick people and trip people and do all that kind of stuff, right? He's kind of known for that. He's had 3 instances, and every single one has looked a little bit different. One time he was laying on the floor. One time the dude was running behind him, and he kicked him. And then this recent time, basically the guy was driving to the basket, and he just kind of put his leg out, tripped him, and this has been addressed last year, and finally it happened again this year, and you could see him trying to argue his case with the referees. He's on the bench, kind of losing his mind, basically. Self-destructing. Self-destructing is kind of a, big word. I don't really want to use that. But, saw him kind of like, lose his mind a little bit on the sideline. So they suspended him, right? But they suspended him indefinitely. So why does that matter? Why does the indefinite suspension thing matter? Because indefinite basically means as long as you want, right? It's one of those kind of like really high power, like, oh, I'm going to suspend you indefinitely, which when you hear that, you think you're going to be suspended for a very long period of time, like weeks, months, something like that. Well, Grayson Allen is now back with the Duke Blue Devils. You want to know how long his suspension was? It wasn't for 2 games. It wasn't for 3 games. It wasn't for 5 games. It was for 1 game. 1 game. That's all he got suspended for. He got suspended for the game against Virginia Tech, which, by the way, they lost 89-75. I don't think that's a small factor that you can look past because Coach K is basically, if not the greatest, John Wooden, one of the 2, 3 best coaches in the history of college basketball, and he does not like to lose, right? You can talk all this about, oh, you need to teach him a lesson. Oh, he needs to, be somebody that, gets the full message and learns from it and comes back better. Okay, fine. I get you. But also winning matters, and Duke, they want to win another national championship, right? He has 5. Coach K does. He's not going to get to 10 with John Wooden, but he would like some more because why not? Well, that game I said they lost to Virginia Tech. They lost 89-75. And basically they were beaten by 16 in the first half, never really made it back. Lost by 14, and then all of a sudden, Grayson, no, I understand what I said. Come back here. Now, to be fair, they did revoke his quote-unquote captaincy from the team, which is actually a pretty big thing because, Grayson Allen's a junior on the team, been there for a while. We know who he is. It makes sense that he's the captain of the team. So they took that away. The indefinite suspension was lifted after 1 game. And now it's going to be interesting because Coach K is the one who lifted it, right? He's the one who basically decided, okay, never mind, you come back for his last game before he leaves with back surgery. And, we don't know exactly how long Coach K will be out for. He's talking about a month or something like that. But, I mean, back surgery, and I understand he's a coach, but the same thing, back surgery is one of those things that takes a decent amount of time to, come back from. Ask Dwight Howard, ask anybody, really. But now he's going to be gone. All right, so now what do they do, in his absence? Because, Coach K's been the guy there for, 30, 40 years. The dude's been there since the 80s, and it's something that, you would like to see him still be there. But, that's fine. You're going to have the interim head coach come in for, like I said, a month, maybe 2, something like that. Then Coach K will come back. I think it's interesting, though, with Grayson Allen, it's basically the thing of we're going to punish him. We're going to make sure he knows what he did was wrong. And then after 1 game, oh, never mind. Never mind. It's like the thing like your parents. I don't know if your parents are like this, but I'm kind of like this a little bit. I didn't mess up a lot when I was a kid, but I did it enough. And I kind of, knew that what I ever did was wrong. And they would originally come with the bluster. My parents would be like, no, you're grounded, for a month and a half, for doing something, weird and stupid, like, not doing something, taking out the trash or whatever, because, you get mad and like, oh, you're grounded for a month and a half. After like a week or two, it's just like, okay, never mind, go back. Right? It's one of those things of just like, I think I went a little bit too strong. Never mind, just do this. Because also, don't forget about this, Grayson Allen's really important to the team. The guy's averaging 16 points a game, basically. And if the Duke Blue Devils are going to win another national championship, you kind of need him there. Right? He's kind of important to that, and he's somebody that you need during the stretch run. He's not the leading scorer of the team. That's fine. But he's also somebody who absolutely matters to the team, right? He's somebody who absolutely you need to basically have him in the right state of mind, because there was also the thing of, okay, he's done this 3 times, right? This isn't the first time. This isn't the second time. This is the 3rd time that he's done this. And it's a little bit in the Draymond Green kind of aspect of it, to where, okay, clearly this is something that he has in his head that he knows he shouldn't do, right? The thing with Draymond Green with the NBA with the Golden State Warriors was he keeps kicking people, right? Keeps kicking them in the junk, and you tell him, look, stop. Like, we, basically like publicly shamed him and said, look, this is what's happening. And he got suspended for a game in the playoffs for this, and he's still doing it again this year. So, okay, if you tell him all these things, maybe then it's kind of a psychological thing of just like, look, man, I'm really trying not to do this, but it keeps happening a little bit more, and eventually you can't control what you're doing. So the thing with Grayson Allen, like, he's publicly been taken to task about this last year. Like I said, this isn't the first time that he's done this, but now he's been suspended for this, right? So now he's actually been suspended for a game for this, like Draymond Green. Okay, you got your 1-game suspension. Now let's see if you don't do this going forward, right? Because if he keeps doing this, then I got to kind of question and be like, okay, you literally got publicly shamed for this, and you got suspended for a game for it. If you keep doing it, maybe then it's not in your control, because like, I don't know what else you can really do. You can't take money because not paying people in college, because that's what they do for whatever reason. So the only thing you can really do to punish them is either take away their scholarship, which they're not going to do because, again, super talented. So you take away his playing time, and his playing time was short after you lose the first game in conference play, because that kind of matters. And if you can make it to the tournament, you can't have him suspended for 5 games. Then they lose 5 games, and all of a sudden Duke's out of the top 10, because right now they're ranked 8th. Then they're out of the top 10, they're out of the top 25, and all of a sudden Duke, even though Duke is super relevant nationally, you can't have a team that's losing 10, 12 games. So I get why they brought him back, but I want to see what Grayson Allen does after this, right? I want to see if he's somebody who basically can now not do this, right? But it's kind of in the thing with a bad reputation with him, and now you're going to have referees look for it a little bit more, right? You're going to see what he's doing. You're going to see if it's a dirty play, right? Because Grayson Allen is absolutely in the pantheon now of one of the most hated Duke players of all time, right? He's not Christian Laettner, because Christian Laettner was pretty much the king of the I don't care how mad you are at me, I'm going to keep doing this. I don't know if you've seen the 30 for 30 that they did about Christian Laettner, but man, that he did not care. Like, he stepped on a dude's chest and didn't get ejected from the game. Like, you understand how much sway you have to not get suspended, not get kicked out of a game, when you're basically kicking someone in the chest who's laying down, and you're just like, it's fine. Like, Grayson Allen is absolutely up there with the J.J. Redicks, with the Christian Laettners, with the Wojciechowski, with the, who else is really on that list? I know those guys on the list, right? Greg Wojciechowski, he was somebody who's absolutely just like hated, loathed, and was fine with it. Like I said, Christian Laettner, the same thing. J.J. Reddick's up there throwing up the shockers every time he hits a 3-pointer. Like, all those guys were just super hated Duke guys. And I think Grayson Allen's right up there, right? He also has that very, just kind of like look on his face where it's just like, oh, I don't like you. Like, the very punchable face. Like, I don't mean to like criticize, Grayson Allen. He's got a punchable face. We all can agree, punchable face. It's not his fault. It's your face. Punchable face. Same thing with J.J. Redick. J.J. Redick had that punchable face, and he was also super cocky and arrogant about it. I think Grayson Allen's that cocky and arrogant about it. I think he just does stuff and can't stop doing those things. But now for Duke, like I said, they're, in the middle now of conference play. They lost to Virginia Tech. And then, by the way, when they brought him back, when they finally said, okay, yeah, never mind, I understand what you did, cool, whatever. All right, we need you to come back. We lost to Virginia Tech. We don't want to lose to any more teams in the ACC. So when they finally did bring him back, what happens? Oh, imagine that. They win against Georgia Tech, right? They lose by 14 points, and then all of a sudden when they come back, they win by a lot at Georgia Tech. So obviously they're going to want him back. Obviously it's going to be something that they're going to look forward to with him, because he's one of the best players on the team. So now going forward, without Coach K, if they can maintain this, if they can be a team that's basically still in the top 25, they're going to make it to the playoff, or not the playoffs, they're going to make it to the tournament again. But going forward, like I said, after beating Georgia Tech 110-57, what Duke has remaining, they got Florida State coming up. Excuse me. They got Boston College in their next game. They got Louisville, who's ranked 9th. They got Miami. Because you look at the people while Coach K is gone, right? You got number 9, Louisville. You got number 12, Florida State. You got number 23, Notre Dame. And you got number 14, North Carolina in the beginning of February, right? Because if you say Coach K is going to be out for around a month, that puts him back right around, February 9th when they face North Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see in that time frame, because let's say he's out a month, right? Let's put it at a month. Boston College, Florida State, Louisville, Miami, North Carolina State, Wake Forest, Notre Dame, and Pitt, right? 8 games. They have 8 games possibly without Coach K, and if they can go 6-2 in that time frame, then that's fine. If they can go 7-1, even better. 8-0, great. But let's call it 6-2, 7-1, right? If they can continue that and maintain that, then all of a sudden, you're 20-3, 18-4, something like that, and you're right in prime spot basically to, once Coach K comes back, bam, you got North Carolina. So going forward, Grayson Allen's back. Cool, awesome. Like, honestly, how long did you want him suspended for? Because that's the actual funniest thing about this is, like, how long did you want Grayson Allen suspended for? Did you really want him suspended for, like, 30 games, like the whole rest of the season? Did you want him suspended for 10 games, for 5 games? Like, what did you really want? Like, he was publicly humiliated, stripped with the captaincy. Like, he basically got as much as you can do for a college basketball player, right? In the pros, fine. You want to fine him, cool. But there's no money to fine him in college basketball. Grayson Allen basically got all the public shame that he could. So now going forward, welcome him back. Let's win some games for Duke, and we'll see how it goes from there. But until then, it's just a funny story. And we put Grayson Allen right there in the pantheon of most hated Duke players of all time, which is a very, 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 exclusive list, right? Because there's been people that's not been liked necessarily. There's been players that have been quote-unquote dirty, but Grayson Allen's absolutely up there, right? He's probably on that Mount Rushmore now after tripping people all these other times. But we'll take our first break on the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. All right, so now we're going to go from college basketball. We're going to come over to the football side for the playoffs. So it's official right now. Ryan Tannehill, he's out for the Miami Dolphins against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Matt Moore will take over. He'll start for the 4th week in a row. They determined just basically that Tannehill isn't ready for a return from a sprained left knee that he suffered in Week 14. So Matt Moore, 10th-year pro, he's been 2-1 so far for the Dolphins this year. He's been okay for them. 8 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, QB rating 105.6, which, by the way, is higher than Ryan Tannehill's. But, again, as a backup role, you can't really look at that too much because it's the limited sample size and everything else. But Ryan Tannehill's out, which he hasn't missed a game in the 5 seasons up until he got sidelined in Week 14 against the Cardinals. He's never played in the postseason, and this will be the Dolphins' first one since 2008. And for Matt Moore, he's somebody who, as far as the backups go, because looking at the AFC playoffs, there's 3 backups, basically. I guess Osweiler's not a backup, but you have Osweiler, you have Matt Moore, because Tom Savage didn't get it for the Houston Texans, and then you also have Connor Cook over in Oakland. So of those 3, that are going to start because, Alex Smith, Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, fine. Those are elite enough quarterbacks, fine. But the other 3, I think that Matt Moore is probably the best of the 3 because at one point he was a starter, right? Osweiler was a starter, but he looked bad as a starter, right? He didn't look like anything that you would want out of a quarterback, that you gave especially all that money to. But Matt Moore, he's been fine. Like, he's someone who, as a backup quarterback, that's all you really need. You didn't expect him to make the playoffs or just start in the playoffs. You didn't expect anything else like that. You expected Tannehill to be there because, like I said, he hasn't missed a game up until this point. And it's not like that offensive line for Miami has been great. I understand that they drafted people high. I understand you drafted Laramie Tunsil. I understand you took one of the Pouncey brothers. You took Marquise Pouncey out of Florida in the center, really high in the draft. I understand you did all those things, but the offensive line has been not great for them the entire year, especially the last 5 years. And Tannehill has been someone who's continued to stay in the lineup the whole time. And so now with Matt Moore, you have something who, I mean, it's not the ideal situation, obviously, but it's something that you can kind of at least work with, right? Because you have Jay Ajayi, who's been a godsend for the Miami Dolphins, right? He's had 3 games, I believe, where he's had 200 yards rushing, and he's had a game with 100 yards rushing as well. Like, he's had really good games this year. Yeah, he's had games with 50 and, stuff like that, but he's also been somebody who's absolutely been somebody that you want to, rely on for the Dolphins going forward. And with someone like Matt Moore, like I said, he's a 10-year veteran in the league. And, I mean, he's somebody who, worst case scenario, use some checkdowns too. You kind of get him involved a little bit in the passing game because back then, back in 2012 and 2011, he was the starter for the Miami Dolphins, right? In 2011, he, 16 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions, throwing for about 2,500 yards. He's okay. Is he great? No, but he's okay. And so going forward for the Dolphins, you rely on Jay Ajayi. You rely on him to basically be the guy that can get you, call it 90 yards, 100 yards, something like that, right, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Although the thing with the Pittsburgh Steelers is they're coming in super healthy, right? For the Dolphins, the quarterback's out, which is the most important thing. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown, all of them are healthy, and all of them are healthy. This isn't one of those things of just like, yeah, well, they're coming back off of an injury, and they played last week, and they look fine. No, they've been playing the whole season, basically, for them, right? Le'Veon Bell got suspended for the first 3 games of the season, but Antonio Brown's been there the whole time, but Ben Roethlisberger got hurt, oddly enough, with the Miami Dolphins. But he, as of recently, has been playing fantastic for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and it's going to be in Pittsburgh. And by the way, the Dolphins haven't really played games where they haven't been kind of in nice warm weather because Miami seems to be the only city in the United States that basically hasn't been affected by this winter, right? They've been a city that's been around 60s basically the entire time. So now you look at this going forward for the Dolphins. Okay, cool. So Matt Moore's going to be your starter, and that's fine. Can't do anything about it. Tannehill's too injured. Going forward, that's fine. So what do you have to rely on for the Dolphins? Okay, you got Jay Ajayi, you got Jarvis Landry, you got Parker. You have good guys for the Miami Dolphins if that's what you decide to do. Also, one problem with that is, let's say Jay Ajayi is your number 1 guy you're going to rely on, right? Cool, awesome, fantastic. Also, he's somebody who is going up against the Steelers' defense. And while the Steelers' defense isn't necessarily as a whole on the whole season something that's great and fantastic if you look at it on average, the last, call it 7 games they played, right? Because take out the last game against the Cleveland Browns, right? Don't worry about that, because nobody played for the Steelers, right? Ben Roethlisberger wasn't playing. Le'Veon Bell wasn't playing. Antonio Brown wasn't playing, right? Basically, they just went all backups, on that team. So don't look at Isaiah Crowell's last game against the Steelers where he gave like 154 yards. Don't worry about that. Other games against Baltimore, against Cincinnati, Buffalo, the Giants, the Colts, and the Browns again. None of those teams got at least 70 yards rushing. Like, their defense, as far as rushing defense, has been really, really good. So it doesn't bode well for the Miami Dolphins. The one thing you're going to rely on, if the one thing that you're going to basically cling to, that one branch that you're clinging to as you're falling down, is the rushing game, and the Pittsburgh Steelers basically figured out that the people that you're going to do that with, they got you with that. They're not going to allow you to do that. Now you can say, okay, the teams they've been playing with the Giants, with the Colts, with the Bengals, with the Bills, they don't necessarily have that top-tier running back because the game before Crowell that they actually did give up 100 yards to was Ezekiel Elliott, who's probably the best running back in the game outside of the one they have in their own backfield in Le'Veon Bell. But at least with the Giants, you had something where you had the potential of Sean McCoy. At least with the Indianapolis Colts, you had Frank Gore, who's been very, very consistent all year. But none of that ever ended up, transpiring as far as actual yards rushing for the Steelers. So the one thing with the Miami Dolphins is, okay, so if you say the running game isn't going to get you 100 yards, okay, so now you got to adjust. So what are you going to do? Jarvis Landry gets you those little slant passes. He's not going to be the guy that totally breaks it for 100 yards, for like 80 yards on a very long pass play. That's not what he does. Parker can do that, right? Parker for the Dolphins can actually do that. But going forward, I'm thinking the one thing the Dolphins have to rely on, especially with the backup quarterback, is basically don't lose the game for us, right? Don't be the guy that we have to basically monitor and hope to God that he throws 3 interceptions, because at that point they're done, right? Because we've seen Le'Veon Bell as one of the most patient running backs in the game. The man does not freak out. He runs to not even run to the offensive line. Like, he jogs to the offensive line, looks for the hole, and then he's gone, right? And not only that, not only the running game, where he's getting 1,200, almost 1,300 yards in 13 games, averaging basically 100 yards per game. Also, if you go look at the receiving yards, he's got 75 receptions, Le'Veon Bell does. 75 receptions for 616 yards. He is one of the best pass-catching running backs in the game, and you're going to have to basically hope that he doesn't decide to basically do that again. And then you got Antonio Brown. Like, it's going to be a very long day for the Miami Dolphins looking at this because Tannehill is the one thing where he at least be mobile. And Matt Moore is mobile enough, but he's not Ryan Tannehill mobility, and he's not as, like, crisp as Ryan Tannehill would be, right? Because as good as Matt Moore has been playing, like I said, he's also the backup quarterback and has to basically come in basically off the, bench randomly, and he doesn't have the same connection with Parker. He doesn't have the same connection with Jarvis Landry. So it's going to be interesting, and although Ryan Tannehill's out, I don't fully think the Dolphins have no chance, but I think this game pretty much will now go to the Pittsburgh Steelers unless Ndamukong Suh can basically do what he did last time with the Miami Dolphins. That's basically hobble Big Ben, because if you can hobble Big Ben, then all bets are off because, Landry hasn't exactly been anything that you would hope he'd be for a backup quarterback. He's like, okay, he's fine. Like, yeah, he won a game against Cleveland Browns last week, also the Cleveland Browns. So unless they can get to Ben Roethlisberger, I don't see this going well for the Miami Dolphins. But with that being said, we're going to take our next break. We're going to come back right here on the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. All right, so final topic of the day, we're going to talk about Chip Kelly and basically his, willingness to basically do whatever now because, to be fair, the man's getting paid a boatload of money. And he doesn't really care if he's going to be, in college or the pros. He basically said, I'm willing to do anything at this point. So, whether it's going back to college or staying in the pros, it's something that he's very open to do. So his time when, college football was obviously great when he was in the University of Oregon, basically made that program really relevant, be it with all the uniforms or the fact that they were, winning a lot of games every year and were the national title picture, basically the start of every year. So then he goes to the pros, goes to Philadelphia. Doesn't exactly work out how you'd hoped, right? He kind of has complete player control. And, he runs out some players. He runs out Deshaun Jackson. He runs out LaShawn McCoy. Kind of tries to make the team, in his likeness, right? He tries to make the team how he thinks they should be. And it doesn't work out, right? All of a sudden, he starts losing games. All of a sudden, basically the fans start turning on him because you take the people who are super talented, a la Deshaun Jackson and LaShawn McCoy, and basically say, yeah, never mind. You guys go away. So now we got the situation where he's over there and he gets fired from Philadelphia, but then he immediately goes right back to San Francisco, gets the job, and after 1 year, fired, which honestly wasn't really his fault. Like, we could talk about Chip Kelly being a bad, personnel guy all we want, and that's fine. He probably is because you look at the thing he did in Philadelphia where he ran out the good players, the people that he got back, wasn't that good because if you look at the team last year, they didn't really have that much talent on the team, especially in wide receivers. They dropped a lot of balls. Right, Jordan Matthews was probably the best guy that they had on the team, and he wasn't exactly great for them, right? You got the rookie quarterback in Carson Wentz. He was okay. He's fine. He was number 2 overall pick. Like, what do you really want from him? Like, he won a handful of games for the team, and it was looking good, and it was something that you can build on. But as far as the talent goes on the team, it wasn't anything that was, like, super rich and something you could look forward to. You still had Darren Sproles doing a lot of stuff, and I love Darren Sproles, but he's not the guy that you should rely on as much as they probably were relying on him. So that kind of goes to Chip Kelly, and that's kind of his fault. But now, over in San Francisco, what did you want from the man? Like, yeah, they only won 2 games. And, yeah, it's the most losses that the San Francisco 49ers have ever had. But it's also something where, you had Jim Tom Sula last year, who was a train wreck, who had a train wreck of a season as well, because basically what happened was Trent Baalke, Jim Harbaugh, they didn't get along, right? We all know the story. They didn't get along. They didn't like each other. And then basically Jim Harbaugh left, right? He went to the University of Michigan. And he left the team, and everybody that was good on that team, like pretty much every single player that was on that team, Be it, Alden Smith, who didn't retire, but he was gone from the team, right? Patrick Willis, gone from the team. Frank Gore, gone from the team. Kaepernick, not the same dude anymore because the people that are around him aren't the same thing. Justin Smith, retired, right? Like all these people that were on the team that were super, super good and super talented, and the reason that they were making it to the NFC Championship game and to the Super Bowl, all of a sudden they start leaving. And I don't care how good of a coach you are. I don't care if you're Bill Belichick. You need talent on the team. Like we can talk all about Bill Belichick trading away Chandler Jones and, in the middle of the season, trading away the linebacker that they had over there as well. Like, you can talk about that all day long. And that's fine. And Belichick's probably the greatest coach in the history of pro football. But also, you got to have some talent on that team, man. You got to have some Malcolm Butlers on that team, right? You got to have some people that you can at least rely on that can do good things for you. You got to have someone that you could basically say, like, 2 or 3 players on each side that's just like, okay, cool. This guy is the captain of the defense. This guy is the captain of the offense. Because offensively, you got Tom Brady, and he basically makes up for all of that, right? Tom Brady's maybe the greatest quarterback of all time. Doesn't matter who you get rid of. Doesn't matter if you get rid of Wes Welker. Doesn't matter if you get rid of Randy Moss. Doesn't matter who you get rid of, right? You got people on the team that you can rely on. For San Francisco, they didn't have anybody on the team, right? You had Colin Kaepernick. Say whatever you want about Kaepernick off the field. On the field, he was fine. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't anybody that was like, oh, my God, he's amazing. He's absolutely deserving of a huge contract. No. But at the same time, Colin Kaepernick was somebody who, when they finally decided to put him in, because he had Blaine Gabbert, who was the original starter for the season, once you finally decided to put him in, he did fine. He had over like 300 yards, once, and then he had 266. He had 296. I mean, the man was fine. Like, he wasn't anything that you're going to, like I said, rebuild a franchise off of. But, I mean, everything considered, 16 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in 7 games. That's not bad. That's better than a lot of quarterbacks can do in the NFL, right? But you had the thing where the offensive line was bad, the defensive line was bad, the special teams was bad, and the head coach was just basically there like, I don't know what you want from me. So now with Chip Kelly, he says he's open to everything, right? Maybe he'll be an offensive coordinator in the NFL. Maybe he's going to go back to college. And basically, he doesn't have to worry about it this year, right? Because basically all the good college coaching jobs are basically taken up, right? I mean, Lane Kiffin had to go to FAU, right? Like, there wasn't anything that was, like, super available that was good. I mean, I guess the Minnesota job's open right now, and if Chip Kelly wants to do that, I guess that'd be a solid move because they just fired their head coach, Clays, who had a whole other kind of controversy with that, basically having to go back and forth with his players, or not with his players, go and decide with his players and going against management and that whole thing. And that's kind of a chaotic mess because not only that, you also have the players that are on the University of Minnesota, who are basically willing to transfer. And don't forget about college transferring. It's not like the college coach where basically he can go from one university to the other and he's fine. With college players, you have to sit out for a year if you transfer to another Division I school. Like if you go to a Division I AA, go to the junior college thing, yeah, you can play right away. That's kind of what Cam Newton did. But if you go from, say, Minnesota to, call it Michigan, or to Ohio State, or to Nevada, or to Miami, or wherever you're going, you got to sit out a year. And a lot of the players are willing to do that. And you can call it bluffing. You can say they're just doing that to posture. Well, they were willing to sit out. They were willing to protest. Now, they didn't, but they were absolutely willing to boycott the game. So at least their threats are at least somewhat relevant. You have to somewhat, understand that that's a thing and that's how it's going to go. So now with Chip Kelly, if he decides to go to University of Minnesota, I think it's a pretty good job. But really, all he really has to do is just kind of sit back, relax, have some fun while you're in college or while you're waiting around. Maybe go to ESPN, maybe go to Fox, maybe go to CBS, go wherever, right? Go over there, collect your money because you're getting paid a lot of money because they didn't sign him to a one-year deal. They signed him to a multi-year deal, which he's still going to get paid for. He's still getting paid by Philadelphia. He's getting paid by 2 teams. If I'm Chip Kelly, I sit around saying, all right, great. I'm going to enjoy this. I'm going to take a year off where I'm not getting yelled at by the media all the time for how good or bad I'm doing. And I look to see what comes available for the NFL because maybe you don't get another head coaching job. Fine. But maybe you do the whole Norv Turner thing, right? Who was a good offensive coordinator, decided to be head coach. Not exactly the same thing. Decided to go back to offensive coordinator stuff. Now, Chip Kelly's never been an offensive coordinator, but at least from his time at the University of Oregon, he at least can draw up some nice plays, right? He's a good, at least, offensive mind. So maybe he sits around and says, all right, I'll do the offensive coordinator thing, or maybe he goes back to Minnesota. Because even if you don't want to go to Minnesota, I guarantee one of the big-name coaching jobs is going to be available, right? Maybe LSU if they kind of struggle a little bit. Maybe they don't want them to come back. Maybe, you look over and kind of the other universities that are around, Michigan, Ohio State, Miami, Florida, maybe Florida. Florida might be something that comes available, right? You kind of look and see what's available, and if something comes, then you go there. You don't have to worry about it right now because, like I said, you're getting a lot of money. But for Chip Kelly, His time in the pros as a head coach, that's probably done. Honestly, that's probably not going to happen again unless he does really well in college again, and then he gets that chance one more time, a la Pete Carroll, who was really good when he was at USC. Before that was in New England. Didn't do what you would hoped he would do. Went to college, did well, came back, got another head coaching job. Maybe he can do something like that. The other thing with Chip Kelly is you got to be a little bit more contrite, man. Like, you can't come in, all boasting about how good you are and how smart you are, and then you get in the NFL and you start losing. Like, that's just going to make us yell at you and ridicule you and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, that's how that's going to go. But for Chip Kelly, sit out a little bit, enjoy your time, count your money, and at the end of the day, watch football like the rest of us, right? And kind of laugh at like, oh, I could do a better job than that, because that's what he's going to do. I'd like to see what happens with Chip Kelly. I'd like to see him get another opportunity because I do think he got kind of a raw deal in San Francisco. I don't think he got a raw deal in Philadelphia, but I think in San Francisco he got a raw deal because he was somebody who was basically told, like, all right, you take this dumpster fire and you make this great, and he couldn't make it great. You know why he couldn't make it great? Because no one could have made that great, because that whole situation was just kind of messed up from the start. And now he's going to take a couple of years off, a year or two off, and he's going to come back, and I hope he has success once again. With that being said, my name is Anthony, and this has been the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast. We will be back tomorrow. We're going to have Jeremiah back in here. We're going to have Ben back in here. We're going to talk about everything in sports. We'll talk about the upcoming games for the NFL. We're going to talk about the Raiders taking on the Houston Texans. We're going to talk about the Miami Dolphins taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers and everything else that's going on in the world of sports. In the meantime, like I said, my name is Anthony. Have a good rest of the day, and I will talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.